Hi, I'm David Regal, and thank you for getting the Color Changing Knives. You have a very interesting set here. It's really a set that I've wanted for about 30 years. That sounds unbelievable, but it's true. I've had different sets of color changing knives, some highly regarded, and I always felt, gee, this is good, but I'd really prefer it if this was like that. And some of what I wanted was not easily done, but eventually I bit the bullet. I went to some different manufacturers. I said, can you do this? Can you do that? And it wasn't a matter of taking a knife they already had and saying, oh, put this handle there and that handle there. These had to be designed from the ground up to my specifications. That means the length, the heft, the weight, the width, and some little tweaks that you'll see in just a minute. The result is, I hope, a set of knives you will really be proud to use and happy to own. Let's take a look at what you get. It's 4 different knives in this set. 2 are ordinary. In other words, they have the same color on both sides. The black is textured. You can feel through the sort of stag appearance and texture what side is black just from touch alone. These knives are 3 inches long, a little bit bigger than the Scotty York set, for instance, that I had. They're about a ½ inch at the widest point. That means, well, they're a little wider than the pencil-thin knives sometimes you see. I wanted that for a couple of reasons. The more color you have, that's more real estate for the effect. When the color changes, it happens on a slightly larger area, which is useful. I put on 1 bolster, not 2, for exactly that reason. I get a little more real estate, but if I want to improve angles depending on working conditions, I could face the bolster toward the audience. And of course, the bolster gives you a little more insurance, so you don't have to be quite as careful with angles. 3 rivets on each side. I mentioned this for a reason that'll become clear in a minute. 2 of the knives, as I say, are ordinary, black textured, and then smooth mother of pearl look for the white. So it's a very striking change when a knife changes from dark black, flat, to the sort of opalized mother of pearl look on the white. Then you have the main gaff, used for most of the routine, which is the classic gimmick in color changing knives. Black on one side, white on the other. If you don't understand the basic idea behind color changing knives, or if you're new to the routine, it's very, very simple. You create the illusion that a 2-sided knife is really just has the same color on both sides. And you do that with the paddle move or a variation of the paddle move for the most part. And we'll get into all the little steps along the way. The final knife you have is black on one side and the climax knife on the other, which is a knife that looks like a Swiss Army knife. This was very important to me. And one of the reasons I had this set manufactured. My knife set that turned red at the end, I liked a lot. Black to white, then to red. And you'd make a comment about Swiss Army, but it didn't look that much like a Swiss Army knife. To look like a Swiss Army knife, well, it takes a few things. The width has to be a little bit more than what I had in my previous set. You need a logo to sort of imply that Swiss Army look. And there's 2 subtle things that happen. Well, there are no rivets. The other knives have rivets, no rivets. What else does it not have? A bolster. There is no bolster. Swiss Army knives do not have a visible bolster. Well, on my gimmick knife, you have textured black with a bolster and 3 rivets, and it changes, transforms into a Swiss Army knife. So immediately you feel it's a Swiss Army knife. You get that sensation. And I do believe somewhere in your DNA, you're feeling the absence of that bolster and the 3 rivets. And in my routine, and you may have your own routine, but in my routine, everything is a transposition, till the very end where it becomes a transformation. So all the phases are about a white and black knife changing places. The colors aren't changing, the knives are changing places till the very end, where the black knife transforms into a red Swiss Army knife for that final beat. So that's basically what you have in the box. Let's talk a little bit more about the slights you'll be using when you perform the color changing knives. I realize most of you already know the paddle move, but for those of you who don't know it, let me explain it and then some variants of the paddle move you can incorporate into your routine. The paddle move, the idea of it, is to show the same side of an object twice. The black-white knife is being used, but by doing the paddle move, it looks like it's white on both sides. All you're doing is, well, obviously, if you were to do this legitimately, they would see black on the other side. But as you turn the knife by turning the wrist, and you can do it, it doesn't have to be a giant motion, you're going to push the knife over with the thumb and then pull it back when you go the other direction. So from here to there, you push the knife over and you pull it back going the other way. Now you don't have to hold the knife at the very end to do that. You can hold the knife in the middle or the other end, any way you like, so long as you make sure they can see the other side. If you're holding in the middle, doing the paddle move, keeping the fingers here is not that effective. If you're going to do the paddle move, holding the knife in the middle, get the fingers out of the way on the way up, and then you can bring it back on the way down. That's the basic paddle move. It's possible to not always do the exact same thing when doing the paddle move. You always want to try and marry it to a motivated action, as you'll see in my routine. And the motivated action could just be your own curiosity, looking at the knife, wow, that was interesting, as opposed to look at my knife on both sides, which is a very kind of look at me, I'm a magician action, which you don't always want. So what's a variation? Well, the half paddle, do the paddle move on the way up. So I'm pushing it over, boom, on the way up. But on the way down, don't do the paddle move again. Instead, reach out with the fingers, lower the hand, and show the other side of the knife. So you do the paddle move in one direction, but not in the other direction. As you're talking, as you're displaying the knife, it can actually seem, again, that you've shown both sides of the knife, but not in the same repeated action. It is possible, believe it or not, to just do a quarter paddle move. Again, not necessarily every time, but comes in handy. Now, what does that mean? Well, in this routine, and in a lot of routines, you're going to have the knives in your hand. Now, I size these at 3 inches because look at my hand. It's exactly 3 inches. So it covers that knife. But that's the good thing about having a bolster on one end. It gives you a little extra leeway. If your hand is larger than mine, and my hands are not large, they're just enough size to palm a card. But if your hands are a little smaller, that bolster gives you a little extra cover. You can let the bolster stick out and still mask the color of the knife that's in your hand. The quarter move happens when you're going to remove a knife from your hand, placing it to the other hand, facing it toward the eyes of the spectators. Now, if you look at this, everything's very nicely covered, but the knife only has to turn a quarter of the way when the hand comes up. In other words, it's not even a half revolution, it's a quarter revolution on the way up. And then on the way down, you can just open up your hand, and it's just a variant that allows you to display the knives in ways that seem a little more casual. Here's another variation you can use. It may play a part in your routine. You're going to do the paddle move, but instead of leaving the knife in one hand as you do the move, do the move as you pass the knife into the other hand. It's just a variation, but it seems very casual, very open, and you can throw it in there every now and then. Now let's talk about the changes in color that can happen after you do the paddle move. A simple one is simply to close the hand and change that knife, then showing that knife or maybe two knives again on both sides. Obviously, all I'm doing is once the knife is in the hand, by closing the fingers, the knife is turning over. An important thing to remember in this change, or any change with knives or anything else, try and keep the A side close in proximity to the B side. Now, what does that mean? Well, the A side is the state of affairs before a change. Here's a white knife on both sides. Boom, now it's black. You kind of feel it in your gut. But if too much time goes between the A side and the B side being, in this case, the other color being revealed, it's not as impactful. I can show you a white knife, talk a little bit, yeah, let me grab some magic out of the air, let me sprinkle this on top, and could it have happened? Yes, look, now it's black. Well, it's not horrible, but it lacks some impact. So when you work with changes, with knives or even other items, try to keep that in mind, how much time you're putting between the A and the B, and evaluating that when you put together your routine. A very nice change that you'll use from time to time is the visual no cover change. That's when you show both sides and boom, that knife changes color. All it is the paddle move, but done briskly. So when that thumb pushes over the paddle, boom, it happens quickly. You snap it over. And if you add a little motion, it nicely masks that moment, and you have a very pretty transformation. This is one of my favorite moments in my routine because it's a swindle. And I guess I like swindling people. So I have both knives in my left hand. I put my double-sided knife into my right hand. It's shown on both sides. And then I call attention to the knives. Very important, because what's about to happen occurs in a millisecond. So they must be looking at the knives or they will not see the effect. So you make some comment about the knives, then boom, they change places, both of them. At least that's the illusion. It's a swindle. They feel they've seen both knives instantly change, but obviously, you know, only one has changed. You've shown the white knife, apparently, you know, on both sides, and then you snap it over, doing the instant visual change. At the same moment, you produce the white knife in the other hand. So you put those things together, boom, it looks like those knives have just changed places visibly. Other people do a variant of this situation. They will start from here with the white knife, apparently. Then they'll let the hands cross, do the change, and reveal the white knife in the other hand. Also very effective. The revolution change is one of the most beautiful moves in all of color changing knife magic. And for that reason, it's a good idea to save it for a moment in a routine when you want to escalate the sensation of magic. The idea behind the move is very simple. It's going to look like I'm simply revolving the knife using one finger and never truly concealing the knife. But even though that is happening, the knife still manages to change color. Come close and I'll show you what's going on. Basically, one finger is going to revolve that knife, but as that knife is revolved, the other hand, the thumb, performs the paddle move. It's just two simple things, but when you put them together, you get a very pretty change. In any color-changing knife routine, including mine, you should endeavor to work things out so those knives are reset when you conclude the routine. So if you're in a situation like where you're doing strolling magic or doing several sets, you're always ready to go. It's useful. So my routine involves this setup. Take the main gaff, white and black, put it in the right pocket, as well as the normal black knife. Left pocket is different. Left pocket has the white knife, white on both sides, and the climax knife. The reason for this is I can reach into these pockets, and both hands do the same thing. Both hands, when I'm ready to do the routine, search for knives that feel the same on both sides. When I have those, I know I have the right knives. I'm not even looking, but now I will. White and black. I start my routine by handing these out, and people can look at them. People can handle them. And what else can they do? If they choose to open these knives, and very often they will see a highly polished blade, but it is not razor sharp. These are not toys, as you can feel by the weight, and obviously you could hurt yourself, but these are not razor sharp. I had them manufactured intentionally that way, because the last thing you want is for someone to harm themselves with an object that you put into their hands. So that's just another element I manufactured into these knives. So these go out to the audience. They can look at them. They can examine them. They seem like ordinary knives, which is vitally important. Why? Because it needs to happen at the beginning of the effect, not so much at the end of the effect. This effect, or any effect, I have a problem with a lot of routines where I see a magician say, and you can examine the coins. Well, that bugs me in a couple of ways. One is, if the audience was won over by the routine and they're feeling that sense of astonishment, well, now you've said, stop feeling what you're feeling and make this an intellectual process. Examine these things. Well, why did you stop that? Why did you pull the rug out from under them when they were enjoying themselves? And the other thing it does, which is a big problem, is it's basically asking the audience member to reconsider how they felt 30 seconds ago when the magic was actually taking place. In other words, you've reached your climax, people are feeling what they're going to feel, and you go, oh, and by the way, examine these. Well, okay, so what am I supposed to do now? Now that I've examined these, I'm going to change the way I felt 30 seconds ago. You can't. That moment has come and gone. So, by having items examined at the beginning of the effect, you establish 100% conviction prior to the effect taking place, which is crucial. So that's why I give these out. I talk about them. I do not say examine these knives. Make sure they're not magical. No, no, no. These look like ordinary knives. That was very important to me. They look like knives you'd find in a drawer. Did I pronounce that word correctly? I'm from Boston. Sometimes it comes out wrong. Anyhow, by putting these in people's hands and talking, everyone knows implicitly these are ordinary knives because people are holding them. Why would they be holding them if they were not ordinary? So yeah, the switches take place as the routine goes on, but you start off by implanting 100% conviction. I grew up in the Boston area. Anyone here from around Boston? Yeah, kind of mellow there, laid back, stayed. And I moved from Boston to New York City. And when my dad heard I was moving to New York City, he was a little worried about his boy. He said, David, I want to give you something, a going away present. I want you to have these. Dad, seriously? Yeah, you can have a look at these. These dinky little pocket knives. He thought that was going to save my life on the streets of New York. Like, I'll carry this with me at all times. If someone comes up to me, I just say, hey, stab myself once, throw out my wallet. That'd probably work great. Actually, it's not a bad plan. I'm only 5'6". It probably would have helped. Anyhow, what I didn't realize is in New York, yes, it's violent, but it's also, well, the fashion capital of America. Did you know that? It's true. And they have certain rules, fashion rules in New York, involving street crime. For instance, if you want to stab someone on the streets of New York, and it's before Labor Day, then you use a white knife. Oh, but if it's after Labor Day, no, you use the black knife. It's very, very important. You gotta do the right thing from the streets of New York. Nothing more embarrassing than stabbing someone and realizing it's after the first Monday in September. You don't want to use the white knife for that. No, use the black knife. Leave the white knife at home. Oh, it's weird, isn't it? Yeah, oh, they change places. Did I not mention that? The knives can change places. They're designed to do just that because they have a kind of a rule. They say, in the spring, white is the thing, but in the fall, a white knife appalls. So don't use the white knife. No. Leave the white knife at home. Bring the black knife on your stabbing spree. It is difficult because they change places so quickly. I mean, right in front of you, they'll change. Ooh, that was crazy. It happens quickly, doesn't it? You know, if it gets confusing for you, there are things you can do. You can put one in your pocket. That helps tremendously. But, you know, sometimes the knives can go through clothes. Watch. Ooh, it actually went through. I know, change places through the pocket. But these rules, they really only are valid in the United States, because other countries don't have the same holidays. Think about that, they don't. So anywhere else in the world, stab to your heart's content with any color you'd like. Oh, except in Switzerland. Then they like to use the red knife. It looks sort of like this. I know, it's just rules to follow during stabbing season. You already know the moves that go into the routine, but let's walk through it. In the right pocket, you have the white-black knife. White on one side, black on the other, as well as the legitimate black knife. In the other pocket, you have the Swiss Army Climax knife, which is black on one side, and the legitimate white knife. When I go to get the knives in the routine, after talking about my life, moving to New York, which is a true story. I reach into my pockets, and each hand does the same thing. Goes for the knives that feel the same on both sides. One knife is smooth on both sides. One knife is rough, textured on both sides. When I pull out those knives by feel, I know I have the correct knives. I can toss them on the surface if I have a surface, or just hand them to people as I continue my introduction to the routine. At some point, I'm going to take the black knife and switch it for the gimmick in my pocket, but I want to motivate that switch. It's very important that it's motivated, the hand going into the pocket. So I talk about, what am I supposed to do with this? How is this going to protect me on the street? Carry it with me all the time? And then whenever someone comes up to me, I pull out the knife, and now there was a reason to come out with the knife. And instead of doing the paddle move, just like this, I try to motivate it with the script. I talk about stabbing myself once, throw in my wallet. And they've seen the paddle move. Stab myself once, throw in the wallet, without it seeming like a move. It just seems like I'm, giving you a visual explanation of what I'm saying. So now that I have the gimmick, both knives go into the hand. Again, I don't worry about where the bolster is, because I just angle the knives depending on where the audience happens to be. But I always like to keep the black-white knife outward. It's the habit I've gotten into. As I talk about the fashion rules in New York, I take out what appears to be the white knife, but actually it's the knife that's white on one side, black on the other, and I do the first paddle move as I'm talking about the rules and whatnot. Again, I try to avoid doing the paddle move like that, which seems very much like a magician's presentation. I'll just do it as I gesture. Sometimes I'll do it when I'm surprised at the results of something, and I'm kind of checking out the status of the knives myself. But I take out the white knife, say how it's the wrong knife, give a little magic motion, open the hand showing a black knife and a white knife there. I always like this white knife to roll a little bit, and then I do the paddle move with both knives, even though I don't have to over here. It's particularly deceptive when you have two knives in play, because I guess it's harder to focus on any one thing, and it's very, very clear that they're seeing both sides of both knives. I basically repeat the same sequence, making it seem a little bit different each time. Take out ostensibly the white knife. As I talk, they'll see both sides. And this time when I close the hand, I make a gesture and show the left hand first, letting that white knife roll. Then I reveal the black knife, and I do, the paddle move, as if I'm surprised too. Yeah, well, how about that? They changed places. That gives me a way of doing the paddle move, again, without being too much of a magic presentation. The third time I do it, well, it's one of my favorite parts of the routine, because it's a swindle. I just like swindling people. I take out ostensibly the white knife. I make sure they're looking down at those knives before the effect happens, because it's very quick. I do one paddle move, then boom. It looks like both knives change places visibly. But of course, that isn't what happens. They see one white knife here. I do the paddle move once, and then I'm going to do the visual change while producing the white knife, or displaying, I should say, the white knife in the left hand. So they see this, boom, and that. That was a bad one. Let me do a good one. This and that. It looks like the knives jumped across, so it's an escalation. Now, I'm going to put away one of the knives into the pocket. Why? Because I need to switch this knife for the climax knife. So I talk about, it's simpler if you're getting confused, if you put one knife in your pocket. Now I'm doing the switch. And I talk about how this can work going through clothing. And again, a paddle move, showing it going through the clothing of my shirt. Now I'll do it through the pants, and they see a visible transposition. The white knife is now disposed of. I should say the half and half knife that appears to be white goes into the right pocket. Now we're all set for the final effect of the routine, the climax, where the knife turns into a red knife, a red Swiss Army knife. For this, we're going to do the revolve vanish. So, as we talk to the audience, we do the paddle move so they see both sides of that black knife. We talk about how this won't be applicable in Switzerland, because there, you have to use one of these. Show both sides of that knife. It gets pocketed, as you say, just some words of advice. Next time, it's stabbing season. You have a nice end to the routine, hopefully a routine that's just packed with magic effect after magic effect. I was very fortunate because when I lived in New York many years ago, every Saturday the magicians got together in the back of a restaurant and basically had fights. I do it this way, I do it that way. And it was great. Every weekend, fantastic. Great group of people. And some terrific magic. At that time, in the 1980s, everything was visual. The trend in close-up magic, make it visual. It's better if it's visual. And no matter what the trick was, everyone was trying to make every beat visual. And now and then, some old-timer would say, no, it doesn't have to be visual. And in the case of the knives, something great happened. People were fighting about the knives. I guess a couple of people brought knives that week. Everyone was passing them around saying, here's how I do it, here's how I do it, here's how the new people do it. And the old-timer, who I think was 95 back then, said, no, here, one of the greatest moves, not visual at all, but it's great. Here's what the guy showed us. The two knives were on his hand, he covered them up. He probably didn't use a handkerchief, he probably used a napkin from the restaurant, and he went, watch. And in 1 second, those knives changed places. It really was spectacular and not visual. What happens is simple. The knife closer to the fingertips is the half and half knife. The other knife is solid. After the knives are covered, the hand goes under, turns over the half and half knife, and brings it on top of the cloth. So it looks like this. They get covered, the hand goes under, turns over the half and half knife, comes out with apparently the white knife, but I leave space between that knife on top of the cloth and the knife underneath it. Enough room for the cloth to simply turn over that knife and produce the transposition. It's really a variation of a Fred Kapp sequence. Fred's sequence was a little bit different, and the knives can be closer together. I'll show you why. They get covered up. The hand goes underneath, turns over that knife, and it can be closer to the knife under the handkerchief because instead of pulling from the front, Fred pulled from the rear. He'd say, there's the white knife on top, so how can it be underneath? And he'd do the transposition that way. Either way you do it, it's a stunning sequence. The through the fist change is a move that a lot of magicians use in their color changing knife routines. It's very simple. The idea is the knife goes through the fist once or twice, and then it changes. The basic idea of this is, well, if you put the knife sort of in the middle of your fingers and you close your hand, well, obviously that's going to turn the knife over. So you go like this, and it comes out the same color because you put it in the middle. But then when you want the knife to change, put it closer to where the fingers meet the hand. And now that knife will not turn over, so when you rotate the hand, you can show the other side of the knife. Jose de la Torre had a lovely addition to this through the fist change. What he would do is he'd start the change, and after about, a third of the knife was exposed, he'd turn his hand over and you'd see the entire knife had changed. What he was doing was using the fingertips to push over that knife, to roll over the knife, but doing it as the hand revolves. So here, the knife will not change color. I put it at the base of the fingers. The fingertips touch the knife. It comes through. They see the color has changed. Now the hand revolves, and the entire knife is shown to have changed. A beautiful climactic sequence you can use in a color-changing knife routine is a transposition involving the spectator's hand. It's something commonly done in a copper-silver coin trick or other kind of coin effects. What you're going to do with a spectator is put the gimmick into her hand. The gaff knife goes into her hand. Positioned sort of like this. Well, you can choose where to put the gimmick, but when you put it in her hand or his hand, fold the fingers over, turn the hand over. Now you can reach into that hand, pulling out, a knife. They think you've taken out the white knife, but of course you've taken out the half and half knife, showing the white side. So you've set yourself up now for an amazing transposition because you can show both sides of the knife and then boom, have it change places, saying boom loudly. And when they open their hand, they'll be amazed to see that white knife. So again, what is the sequence? And this requires management. The two knives go in their hand. You fold their fingers over the knives, and they should be deep in the hand so you don't turn the knife over prematurely. Their fingers go over the knife, turn the hand over so you can pull out the double facer, showing the white side. Boom! Make the magic happen while saying boom loudly. And when they open their hand seeing the white knife, it seems miraculous. Believe it or not, it's possible to turn over that knife and still have it change color. The way that works is this. Obviously, the knife has a different color on each side, but instead of just turning it over once, we're going to very quickly turn it twice. So quickly, the color on the other side does not register. We do that because this is sort of like a square, if you think about it that way, and I like to put my thumb on the inner left corner of the square and the outer right. And with a snapping sort of action, like snapping your fingers, you can snap that knife over very quickly so you can't see that other side and make a lovely color change. I don't do this in my act, but you don't always have to show the knives, one in one hand, one in the other. And this is the double knife. You can have both in the same hand and still do the paddle move with both knives. A nice variant. Just do the paddle move with both, even though it's only necessary with one, and you can show both sides of both knives. Now, in my routine, I don't table the knives. I mean, I do at the beginning. They both go down on the table. But then once I'm into the effect, they're staying in my hands. But you can table the knives. Either the honest knife can go on the table at any point, but if you want to put both down, just lay the gaff behind the ordinary knife, and you're covered from all angles. You can lay a hand down, too, if you feel like there's someone way over here. There's different ways of making it work out. I just want you to know it is an option. I saved this for the end because I don't know whose it is. This is something an old-timer showed me 30 years ago, and I just remember it being great. I'm not even sure I'm, piecing it together correctly, exactly the way he showed me, but it's a wonderful sequence, and maybe you can use it in your own routine. It'll take place at some point. They know about the knives, and you talk about the difficulties the knives give you. The white knife in particular, you put it back in your pocket, you wait 2 seconds, it seems to find its way back. It's crazy, that white knife. The black knife you don't have to worry about because it just disappears on its own. Notice I didn't say boom. That took a lot of willpower. Now, what just happened there? Well, let's talk about it. You have your black and white knife, and you have your normal white knife. They've seen both sides. You simply take out the half and half knife with the white side showing. Your hand is otherwise empty, so you come out with an empty hand. It really went in the pocket, but now, oop, it came back. You've given them an effect in their brain. They think it came back. It didn't come back. You're now removing the only other knife in your hand. Oh, look, the white knife came back. A free effect. And now a second free effect, because they think there's a black knife remaining in your hand. And you make it vanish. Well, that's it. A lot of information about the color-changing knives. But wow, what a great close-up routine the color-changing knives is. It's not a card trick. It's not a coin trick. You're already ahead. And it really creates the sensation of magic. So I hope you do some routine with the color-changing knives. I gave you a 4-knife set, so there's a lot of ways you can create your own routine with your own stamp as you perform your version of the color-changing knives.